Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. It's your DC Spotlight for the week of August 21st, 2024. Exciting times, getting closer to DC All In. Hope everybody got a chance to check out our thoughts on the November solicitations that we put out earlier this week. A lot of new series coming, so yeah, people are pretty excited. Meanwhile, all the old stories are counting down, coming to a conclusion, I guess you'd say. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good week, considering what we're headed into. It's hard not to be overly excited and want DC All In to be here already. But yeah, we can't forget. We gotta make sure we finish off what's here now. And yeah, to varying degrees of success, I think the books are doing that. So, what are your thoughts on this week?
It was an interesting week. Some interesting revelations in some of the comics. Only a couple of really stood out for me that I really enjoyed, but it was a slightly better week than in the past. So it's good. Little bit elevated, a little higher this week for me. And there's some comics where I'll be really curious to hear your thoughts on. So curious.
Yeah, let's go ahead and kick it off with Nightwing number 117, Fallen Grayson Part 4. I think this is the next to last issue of the Tom Taylor run. He is the writer, Bruno Redondo on art. We have some inks by K.O. Phillip on some of the pages. Adriano Lucas handles colors, Wes Abbott on letters. Pretty interesting. I feel like Nightwing is ending on a high note. And it does feel like Bruno and Tom are wrapping things up. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that it still feels like there's just something missing. It's almost like it's moving along. I don't want to say too fast, but I feel like this story, and it's so interesting, right? Because so often we talk about Tom Taylor, and one of our criticism is, sometimes his storytelling is a little too decompressed. I almost feel like the pacing is going along a little too fast here. But it's not like the story's unfolding too fast. It just feels like at times we're skipping over important story points, or some of the ideas or some of the moments that I feel like should be emphasized a bit more are a little bit glossed over. It's kind of hard to put my finger on it because I'm still really, really enjoying it. But it does feel like it's moving along pretty quick. I mean, I think it was just last issue that Nightwing headed off to Nanda Parbat, and now he's already back in Bloodhaven here. And while there were some humorous moments, I don't know, I just sort of expected, well, if he's going to solve his issue with his fear of leaping and whatever, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It's going to be a bit of a struggle. We're going to, see him overcome it. And that's kind of not what happens. He sort of remembers that, he drank a glass of water at one point, and he realizes that must have been when I was poisoned, and now I've got this toxin running through me that makes me scared of heights or whatever. And it just, I don't know. It almost seems too convenient at times. But they had a set number of issues, I guess, to get this done. And they need to finish on time, I guess. Because the other part of it is just, like I said, so many times Tom Taylor's really taken his time in the series. And now it's almost like when he should be taking more time, he feels like he's rushing a little bit. I guess maybe that's the best way to put it. It just, sometimes the story, as much as I'm enjoying it, it just feels like we're rushing to the end a little bit to some extent. So the art by Bruno Redondo is still fantastic. No complaints there. And I am really enjoying the series. But I don't know. It does feel a little rushed at times. So I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. What do you think, Rocky?
Well, I know where you're coming from. I feel I don't feel quite the same way. I'm a little bit more forgiving of it, only because I am personally satisfied with the answers to why Dick Grayson can't leap anymore. I thought, to be honest, I was extremely cynical. I thought there's no reason why Dick Grayson should be able. Why can't he leap anymore? It almost seemed absurd to me. This guy, all he does is leap. He jumps for a living, for God's sakes. He's an acrobat. But wow, the explanation here. I mean, I guess for me, I was satisfied with it, and the guilt from the discovery as to what really happened on the night that his parents were killed, who the true target was, and he always intuitively knew, but he never accepted it, and it was that guilt of him actually being the target that actually paralyzed him, and it was that realization of the guilt over time that sort of paralyzed him and took away his ability to leap. It's purely psychological, psychosomatic effect on him, and that's what he overcame. And I actually thought that I appreciated the faster pace, ironically enough. And I find it funny because just when you're getting frustrated with it, I actually found it a little bit gratifying in this issue, because all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, he's leaping. He could suddenly leap. And then we're thinking, like, why? And then, of course, we get the revelation at the end when he confronts Zuko. You understand why he can leap now, because he accepts what actually happened and what that circumstances surrounding his parents' death, while he was the intended target all along. And I thought that worked so well. And then, of course, the moments with he remembers who the secret identity of Heartless, and he has a good Batman. I like the fact too that Tom Taylor didn't spend too much time on Bruce Wayne as Nightwing. It was just very matter of fact. Bruce Wayne, of course, he's going to fill in for him, and that's exactly what he did, and it worked well. And even though I know what you mean, it does feel like a lot of these things are a lot of the plot lines are very quickly resolved, perhaps too conveniently, and then suddenly, why can't he leap? That was quickly resolved too. So I know where you're coming from, but I found myself satisfied with the answer. But perhaps a lot of people will feel as you did. But I actually thought I was pleasantly surprised how much I actually enjoyed this issue. And I'm really looking forward to the final confrontation, which I presumably will be next issue between him and Heartless. I think it's going to be pretty damn good. And I really like how Taylor used Batman as to not make Bruce Wayne center stage. He really is just a guest star. This really is a Dick Grayson's comic book. And he's doing it without too much help from everyone else, and so I quite enjoyed this issue.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. The stories are being wrapped up in a satisfying way, even if I'm being a little nitpicking about the pacing. So anyway, let's move on. Up next, we have Gotham City Sirens #3 from writer Leah Williams. Matteo Loli returns as the artist. Colors by Triana Farrell. Letters by Hassan Hassman Elhau. Been pretty critical of this series in the past, mostly due to some shortcomings in the art. Luckily, I didn't necessarily feel like there was anything glaringly bad in the art this time. It's still, I think, not up to the standard that it should be for a Gotham City Sirens title. But the story is coming together. This particular issue has tons of action. It's very fast-paced. It's what I come to expect from a Gotham City Siren story, with a little bit of humor here and there, some banter back and forth between the various characters. As much as I don't care for Punchline as a character, this kind of explanation of what she's up to and why she's doing it makes a lot of sense. It is, sort of a plot that's worthy of sort of a main DC villain, if you will. So this is without question the best issue of the series so far. But I also have to question just how necessary it is for this series. It's going to be utterly forgettable, I think, ultimately, when the 4th issue comes out and this is all wrapped up. So I end up thinking, so why? If it's not going to have any lasting consequences, and the art was subpar, and even though it's better in this issue, it's still, not really up to DC standards, especially for Gotham City Sirens, in my opinion. Then why did you bother to put this out? Like, I'm just not sure. It feels like a little bit of a cash grab, playing on the name the title, Gotham City Sirens, and not really living up to what we come to expect from a title like that. So, um, all of these characters are popular: Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, Catwoman, White Rabbit. But when they're not drawn to the level that they should be, you end up feeling like you're a little bit cheated. The covers are fantastic for the most part, and that's kind of what we come to expect. Like, you really wish the Dodsons were doing the interior art here, and then it would be exactly what you would expect from Gotham City Sirens. I mean, even the main cover is fantastic with the three of the main characters dressed as cowboys, and it really works. It looks great, but that's not the level of quality we get on the inside. So it's a little frustrating. But again, I don't necessarily hold that against Leah Williams, because the story is, like I said, really come together, and there's tons of action in this issue. So um, yeah, it could be better, but at least it's improving over the past two issues, or the first couple issues, with the art and the story suffered a little bit more from a lack of quality. So anyway, what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
Well, I share your. I ranted enough, I think, on the first two issues about the art. I want to focus on, I think, the more of the positive, at least for me, and my pleasant surprise with the actual story. I think Leigh Williams has done a better job with this story than she has over in the pages of Power Girl. I actually think she's done a decent job of getting us to know Punchline a little bit more, and she's focusing on the online presence and the online villainy, the use of social media by Punchline. I think that works very well. I also appreciated Leigh Williams by using in sort of like a video animated character at the beginning of the story in the first few pages to outline and to summarize what's happened so far. I actually found it helpful because I was just a little bit, it wasn't entirely clear, and it was really nice to see that. And it was done in a humorous way with an animated character, and it really brought me back into the story, and I really appreciated that, especially since the story is meant to be a little bit juvenile and fun, and it is that. I will, as I said before, I'm a Pyrian fanboy. The plot line that the Gotham City Sirens are captured by Punchline, and they're basically in the back of a van, I think, or back to some vehicle that they're caged in the where their temperature is rising, and I thought they were drugged and everything else, and it's potentially for fear of being mind controlled by Punchline. But Leigh Williams isn't going there. I thought that had a lot more potential for Punchline to manipulate the Sirens, but it didn't go in that direction. But I say again that Leigh Williams, she understood the assignment very well, I think, and I think that she did at least she gave the artist opportunities to accentuate the sexiness of these characters. Obviously, we both agree that a different artist may have done a more sexy job of making the characters more provocative visually. But that's neither here nor there. I thought White Rabbit was interesting. I don't know a lot about White Rabbit. I don't remember a lot about her in the Batman debut in the Batman run. I know White Rabbit is essentially she can clone herself. I didn't realize she could clone herself and make herself big and muscular. So I thought that was interesting. I actually had to Google the character to remind myself what the power set of White Rabbit is. But I thought it was interesting enough. But so overall, we're in the third issue here. I'm actually curious to see how things wrap up. I think Punchline is actually it ends up being a surprisingly competent villain here. I'm glad they moved away from the Teenie Howard, tried to make Punchline a mobster, and that just didn't work. This is more Punchline the way that she ought to be written in her online social media roots, and in that respect, it worked. And I hope that future writers sort of pick up on that aspect of Punchline as opposed to viewing her as a mobster like Teenie Howard did in the Batman run. But overall, I'm actually curious as to how this will end next week. And I agree with you on the covers. Great covers by the Dodsons, and I've got two of my four covers for the Julia March connecting covers, and this week has the gorgeous Catwoman on it, which I'll be picking up next week because my retailer is always a week behind. But anyways, I thought this was actually one of the better issues of the three so far.
Oh yeah, without question, the best of the series so far. Hopefully, it ends on a high note, and issue 4 is even better. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Up next, we have the first issue of Tom King's Jenny Sparks series. He is the writer. Jeff Spokes handles the art, including the colors. Clayton Cowell on letters. This is a Black Label book, which is interesting in as much as last time we saw Jenny Sparks, I mean, I can't even remember if it was, I guess it was after DC bought Wildstorm. But, you know, this whole idea of Jenny Sparks, if you're not familiar, she's a century baby. So she was literally born the moment that the last century started. So January 1st, 1900. And she lives for 100 years and then passes away as the century turns, which is a common misconception as well. You know, technically the new millennium starts on January 1st, 2001, not 2000. But be that as it may, it's a common misconception. It's fine. It's not a big deal. The theme and the whole idea of it still works. She was, again, a century baby that was born to basically take care of the existence for that millennium of the 1900s, not for any particular country, but for the world in general. It's an interesting idea, and she, you know, throughout her various appearances in the Wildstorm books over the years, she met many very famous people and influenced them. I think her uncle, I think it's the relationship, is Albert Einstein. She convinced Hitler to stop painting and go into politics. So sometimes she's influencing for good, sometimes for ill, but basically performing her duties as this, you know, protector, mover, influencer of the last century. So when she did pass away, surrounded by her teammates and the authority, her last words were something to the effect that, yeah, you know, make sure you keep doing good, make sure you keep, you know, fighting the good fight, or I'll come back and kick all your heads in. Is the way that she puts it. And if you look at the back cover of the book, it has a quote. It says, "Be better, or I'll come back and kick your heads in," which again is you know what she said when she passed away. So kind of interesting that she's back here in the 21st century, because the intimation would be that, hey, people weren't better. They haven't been better. They haven't been doing the job. So now she's got to come back and do things the right way. So getting back to this idea of why this is Black Label, you know, is it leaning into this idea of Wildstorm when the Wildstorm universe was separate from DC or not? Is it because she is back and she's technically not supposed to be, because, you know, she was the spirit of the last century, not this century? So I don't have the answer, and I kind of wonder why they made it Black Label. Is it just to indicate that it's a more mature title? I'm not really sure. My point being that I don't think it necessarily needs to be Black Label or be out of continuity, which is kind of what we think of, you know, Black Label as at various times. But maybe it just all boils down to the villain of the piece, or the antagonist, as it were, which is Captain Atom, who's being kind of a dick. He, in fact, he even takes some normal people, regular people, hostage in a bar. And it's up to Jenny Sparks to save the day, because that was kind of another one of her roles, and it's certainly the role that Tom King portrays her as here, right? Like, you have all these super heroes, and their job is to kind of police and stop the super villains from getting out of line. But who's going to stop the superheroes when the superheroes get out of line, right? Like that famous line from Alan Moore, "Who watches the Watchmen?" Well, the answer in this case of who's superheroing the superheroes is Jenny Sparks. She doesn't take crap from anybody. Somebody steps out of line, she's the one that's going to come in and handle it. So even to the point where the Trinity, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, are taking a step back in handling Captain Atom, who seems to have kind of lost it. He's not entirely lucid or entirely sane, it seems like. He's babbling about various things that don't really make any sense. And who are they going to send in to save the day? Well, it's not the Justice League. It's not Batman. It's not Superman. It's going to be Jenny Sparks. So I really enjoy the kind of not given a crap attitude that that Tom King portrays her with. I love the art from Jeff's Spokes, and I really enjoyed this first issue. The only thing where I could, slightly nitpick at it is just I'm not sure the choice of Captain Atom as the villain here, so to speak. Um, I don't understand what it is about Captain Atom. Why we talked about it on the Solicit episode. Like, when did Captain Atom become the superhero that, okay, if I want to make a superhero bad guy, I'm going to choose Captain Atom? Like, all the way back from Armageddon 2001, which got leaked and then got changed at the last minute, to various other stories over the years. I'm just not sure. I like Captain Atom as a character. I'm not sure why he always has to be the one that has his reputation tarnished, but he certainly has lost it. I mean, all you have to do is read his list of demands, and when he's taking these hostages, he wants to be God. He wants his family returned to him from the past. He wants a ham sandwich, rye, lettuce, no tomato, mayo, and mustard. I mean, those aren't exactly the demands of a sane person, if you will. But there is also a little bit of a feeling of the Bridge of San Luis Rey, which is a very famous novel from the 18th century, I believe. And it's about a bunch of people that are, I think they're down in Central America or South America. They're all on a bridge at the same time, and the bridge collapses. And the story tells how their lives sort of intersect, and it kind of goes backwards from the collapse and what have you. So there's a little aspect of that in that we get these little vignettes in the beginning of this issue with all these different people, and we're getting a little window into their lives of what they're up to. And you kind of wonder, well, what's the connection of all these people? Then at the end, you realize all the people that you're getting little glimpses at of what they're up to, their everyday lives, they're all the people that are the hostages in the bar. So not dissimilar from what Tom King was able to do in his most recent series that he did with Jorge Fornes, the Dingbats of Danger Street, or it might have just been Danger Street.
Danger Street.
Yeah, Danger Street. Yeah, the Dingbats being one of the characters, along with Lady Cop and the first Starman and Warlord and some other characters. They seemed like such disparate characters, right? And Tom King managed to weave a narrative that made a lot of sense. A little bit similar here with bringing all these strangers together, and I'm sure we'll find out they're more connected, and they will find out they're more connected than they realized. But overall, I really enjoyed this. I'm not overly familiar with Jenny Sparks. When this series got announced, I had to go read up on her because I just wasn't familiar. I'm not someone who's read The Authority and Planetary and Stormwatch and all that kind of stuff before. So I had to go read up on her, but she seemed like an interesting character, but I still wasn't sure what to expect. But after reading this first issue, I have a good idea of what to expect, and my expectations are actually very high. I'm really looking forward to the continuation of the series. I thought it was fantastic, this first issue. So I know you're a little more familiar with me, Rocky. So what do you think of this?
I'm curious. This issue didn't blow me away, but partly because I think I know Tom King. At this point, it's fairly obvious what Tom King's doing here, and I'm a sucker for a good metaphor, and this is going to be ripe with metaphor. Listening to a podcast where he talked about this series. The point of this series entirely is to compare the 20th century with the 21st century, and he's using Jenny Sparks, who is the spirit of the 20th century, to give some commentary on, frankly, Tom King's version of the 21st century. The question being, what can we in the 21st century learn from the 20th century? What have we learned anything? And Jenny Sparks she embodies the 20th century in so many ways, even right down to the cigarette, which embodies cancer, which was the disease of the 20th century. Jenny Sparks is a scene here where she talks about her parents going on the Titanic, or being exposed to the concentration camps. It shows nuclear weapons. Captain Atom is the main character because he embodies nuclear war. What was one of the most fundamental fundamental occurrences of the 20th century? It was the age of the atom. Captain Atom. Captain Atom is in many ways a relic of the 20th century. He embodies nuclear war, the danger of nuclear war. Is the danger of nuclear war still with us in the 21st century? Of course it is. And so Captain Atom finds himself in a bar with 5 or 6 random citizens that we just meet in this issue. So we can expect over the next 5 issues random conversations between Captain Atom and the people in the bar, some insights as to what's going on in their lives, how mundane it is, some reflection of the 21st century, and Jenny Sparks there with her 20th century sarcasm and vulgarity, having some commentary. And the question is, what good is the spirit of the 20th century when you're dealing with a 21st century threat? But at the same time, the 21st century threat of Captain Atom really is an extension of the 20th century, a problem of the 20th century, i.e. nuclear weapons. He's a walking nuclear weapon that we never dealt with in the 20th century. So we can't escape our problems just because we enter a new century. And I think that's the point of Jenny Sparks. And that's why Tom King, I think, had such a desire to use that character. And he does to great effect here. And I really love the attitude of Jenny Sparks toward Batman and the Justice League and the heroes. She is sarcastic. She is vulgar. She's very sexual. She's in your face. She's unapologetic about it. And it's very, very, very refreshing for those of us who like the Authority. The Authority had no problem killing, had no problem taking extreme measures to take out the bad guys. I'm a little bit surprised that Batman was so quick to use Jenny Sparks here, quite frankly. But since that's not the point of this story, I'm very interested. I'm always interested to see what Tom King has to say on when he gets. I don't mind when he gets a little bit philosophical or a little. He tries to go deep. Sometimes it hits with me. Sometimes it doesn't. We'll see where it goes. But this absolutely intrigued me as an opening issue. It's where it goes from here. We'll have to wait and see. Jeff Spokes on the art, fantastic. So I'm in.
I didn't pick up on that at all with Captain Atom. I'm glad you pointed that out. It makes perfect sense for him to be chosen. If it is this exploration and this comparison of the last century against this century, yeah, you could argue that it wasn't just the worst, in a way, the worst invention of the 20th century, maybe the worst invention ever in the history of mankind, but certainly an invention, a development, technology, whatever way you want to label it, that happened in the middle of the last century. The creation of the atomic bomb being kind of the most influential or most important moment of the last century that completely colored society and life and humanity and everything. From the time that bomb was created and used in World War II. It affected everything, every decision, life on this planet in general was so affected by the creation of the atomic bomb. So if Captain Atom is indeed the stand-in for that, yeah, that's a fascinating idea to me. So yeah. Did King mention that on the podcast?
I inferred that. That was me reading in. So he never specifically said those words. That's what I inferred from it, just from because what I know of Captain Atom, and so that was my inference. But I'm like I say, I could be wrong on that. Maybe that's not the point. I have a sneaking suspicion that if this series hits, it's going to be because different readers like you and I can get different things from it, because everything you said wasn't wrong. I mean, we can all take something out of this, and that's where the success of these types of stories lies. That what do we as readers, 24 years into the 21st century, what do we take out of this and the comparisons that he will make? So this could hit really well. So, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Again, really like the first issue. So like you said, we'll see. All right. Up next, we have Dark Knights of Steel, Allwinter #2 from Jay Kristoff as writer, Terso handling the art, Wes Abbott on letters, are handling the main story, and then the backup story, Heir to the Sea, is continuing as well, written by Tom Taylor, Riccardo Federici on art, Eric Prianto on colors, Wes Abbott on letters. So the most interesting thing about this, I sort of complained last time about this book being in black and white and didn't understand because I didn't necessarily care for that, because here's the thing, it's not in black and white like where it's kind of raw pencils and you can see the work the artist has put in and the textures and what have you. It's got gray tones, it's got like ink wash over it. So all the things I love typically about a book that's not colored, being able to see the work that the artist is putting in, that's all covered up with ink wash and gray tones. So it really bothered me. But now we actually have in this issue an in-story explanation for why everything is in gray tones, except for this young boy and when he uses his powers and what have you. So basically, when Vandal Savage, did what he did and conquered everybody, and it's not explained, you know, extremely well or laid out in such a way that we really can understand. But basically, when Vandal Savage did what he did and conquered the old kingdoms or whatever, it sort of, for lack of a better way to put it, removed color from the world. Everything is washed out now. Everything is gray tone. Everything is black and white, which is why this kid stands out so much, because this kid is in color. When he uses his powers, it's in color. Basically, before Vandal Savage broke the world is the way that I'll put it. So that's a really interesting aspect of the story that I didn't pick up on in the first issue. I thought they were just trying to emphasize or put some color in the last pages to make them land more impactfully. I didn't realize it was actually an in-story explanation for why this kid's the only one that has color. So super interesting. It doesn't necessarily make me like the story anymore. It still, in a lot of ways, feels like it belongs in this Dark Knights of Steel world. Don't get me wrong, but it also feels so kind of separate and far off from the story that we got before from Tom Taylor that I don't really see any overt connections. Which again is really it's fine. This is its own standalone story with Slade Wilson, the Dark Knights of Steel version of Slade Wilson and his family, Rose Wilson Ravager and Vandal Savage and what have you. But I do question whether or not those characters are important enough to be carrying the second story that's set in this Dark Knights of Steel. Like, again, the main story had so many, characters from, the main people you would expect: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Harley Quinn, Amanda Waller, just a lot of, main characters that you would expect. But if you would ask me, okay, well, if you're not going to reuse any of those characters, but you're going to use some other, impactful characters and have them show up, I would not have guessed Vandal Savage and Deathstroke. It seems a little bit of an odd choice. And maybe it's just a personal thing for me that I really don't care. Those characters don't matter that much to me to have this be the second story. But in the end, if it is a good story, that's what matters. So far, it's been kind of slow and plodding. There's not a whole lot that happens in this particular issue other than Adeline, who is Slade Wilson's wife, is killed, and Slade and Ravager have a fight, and it is explained that this kid is in color when the rest of the world's in black and white. But it's not moving along very quickly. I will say that. So I wish that it would get to the point a little quicker, because I sort of don't know what it's about, right? Like, Vandal Savage wants this kid. It makes a lot of sense why he would want the kid after the explanation we got this issue. This kid is certainly very powerful if he can bring color back to the world, even, when he's using his powers, even, temporarily. Makes sense that Vandal Savage would want that kid destroyed. So he sends Deathstroke to get the kid. Deathstroke finds out that his wife is protecting the kid. And then when we find out, as sort of a backup plan, Vandal Savage has also sent Ravager, Rose Wilson, Slade Wilson's daughter. And when Slade doesn't get the job done, Ravager takes it upon herself to get the job done. And in the crossfire, Adeline dies. So if you think that's a lot of story for 2 issues, I'm going to disagree. That's not a lot of stuff. That doesn't even sound like enough story for a single issue to me. But I just told you everything that happened in 2 issues. So, I need a little bit more. In addition to, if you want me to care about these characters that I am not really that invested in, and again, I get that's a personal thing, you got to give me more story, and you got to make it matter, because we haven't gotten a lot of story. It hasn't really felt that impactful, and it's characters that I personally am not really invested in. So, it was The only thing I took away from this is, oh, this kid, when he uses his powers, he brings color back to the world. That's interesting. Other than that, it's a bit of a miss for me, at least for the main story. So, anyway, what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
Uh, it hit the target for me. I actually thought, whereas the slow pacing of the story frustrated you, it actually pulled me in. I actually felt a connection. I felt the emotion. One of the things that I got because this was a slow paced story. I think maybe the art. I just so love the art by Terso. It's just amazing art, and it just really pulled me in. I felt the anguish of Deathstroke, and even the first issue, his him the sort of like the sort of the tropey, diehard warrior who's sort of cynical and at the end of his career, and he's sort of lost and directionless, and now he's on one final quest for Vandal Savage, and he ends up meeting Adeline, his former love, finds out this kid Alec can bring color back to a dark and gray and gloomy world, which doesn't just represent the setting, which, by the way, I didn't know either. I didn't know this kid. I thought it was, I didn't realize that was an in-story explanation, so I thought that was kind of cool. So that even enhanced my love for the story more. And I just thought it really worked for me because it doesn't just speak to the environment; it speaks to, I think, the heart of Slade Wilson and to a lot of the characters, and that this kid really, through the color, this kid Alex sort of embodies the hope that maybe he's the. I mean, it's a little bit maybe trope. He's like the chosen one or some kind, and but. I don't know. It worked for me. And I think the art just really re-enhanced it. And it's interesting that Alec is this kid that brings color to the world, because in the backup, which we can talk about now, involves another kid, which is quite interesting, and another aspect of the of Dark Knights of Steel. Do you want to talk about that? The backup.
Yeah, interesting. With Jonathan and Martha Kent, working as soldiers for this rebellion. Amanda Waller's there as well. This story actually takes place before the events of the first Dark Knights of Steel series, and it's almost like the surface world is at war with Atlantis. I guess it's not entirely clear why they're at odds with each other. The general that is in charge of the surface army is Ted Grant, who we know as Wildcat. And so this issue starts off, and there's a battle, and some sorcerer. If I have to guess who this is, he sort of looks like Superman in terms of colors, and the way he's drawn. But clearly he's a magic wielder, and he basically throws water at this surface army. So maybe it's the Dark Knights of Steel version of Orion, the Atlantean sorcerer. Not 100% sure. But regardless, Ted Grant drowns. And so when Jonathan and Martha go to pull him out of the water, one of them intimates, he'll be fine. He's died before, he'll die again. Apparently, much like his namesake, a cat, he's got 9 lives. So that was kind of interesting. The other thing that happens of note is that Martha happens across a boy, a little baby, who is caught up in the battle as well, and he's pinned under this rock under the water. He's down there for a very long time, and Jonathan's like, it's too late, we can't save him, but Martha, being Martha, wants to try anyway. So Jonathan's able to lever the rock enough for her to pull the baby out. Baby turns out to be fine. Turns out the baby can breathe underwater. Clearly, this is Aquaman, because even as Martha's pulling the baby out, there's another Atlantean female soldier that mentions something about him, being able to breathe underwater or what have you. So it's entirely possible. Maybe this whole war, this whole fight, this whole sort of engagement that that the surface world and Atlantis are engaged in is due to this kid. I mean, maybe it's the fact that Aquaman's mother, clearly using the same idea as regular mainstream DC, that his mother is Atlantean. Perhaps his father is from the surface world, forbidden, whatever. We don't know at this point. But I'm enjoying this a lot more, just because it feels like it ties in more to the first Dark Knights of Steel story that we got, and it feels a little more familiar in terms of bringing ideas from the main DCU that we are used to, but kind of twisting them and changing them to suit this sort of medieval story that Tom Taylor's telling. So again, kind of its feel and its tone is much more um, akin to what we got with the first Dark Knights of Steel series, which I really enjoy. Plus, on top of that, it is colored. Nothing's black and white here, but the artwork from Riccardo Federici is awesome. I think I've said this before. He maybe doesn't get enough credit for how good of a storyteller he is. Most people know him for his cover work, which his covers are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Um, but he's has really great transitions and a really good sense of storytelling and page layout and panel layout and that sort of thing. Um, we've both, I think I've lamented in the past that we wish he would do more interior work. I sort of understand why he doesn't, just based on his style. I have a feeling he's not the quickest. It probably takes a while. So doing something like this, where it's a backup and it's only 8 pages or whatever, that may be better suited in terms of what he can handle on a monthly basis. I'm all for it. If it means I'm getting some of his art, once a month, I'm fine with that. Or if DC wants to just put him on a black label book and they don't start releasing it until it's all in the can, I'm fine with that too. But I definitely would like to see him continue with interiors because it's fantastic. As opposed to typically what happens with a lot of people is they make their name on interiors, get popular enough, then they move over to covers because frankly, it pays more and it's less work. I like that, even though he probably could continue to just do cover work and make a very good living, he clearly has a desire to do interiors. So I got to respect that, and I'm here for it. So yeah, I'm enjoying this backup. 2 issues in, enjoying the backup way more than the main story. So what are your thoughts on the
Yeah,
backup story?
I enjoy both equally. I thought this was really good. There's nothing better than when, I mean, most of the time I'm not a fan of having backups, but when they're both equally good and they both contribute to this new mythology that we're getting to know, the fact that we have this, I think, a Mira character, in this, and her son, or Arthur, young Arthur being, Jonathan and Martha Kent raising young Arthur, arguably, and then the name Manta was mentioned as maybe he's more of the powerhouse in terms of Atlantis. I mean, I love that, Tom Taylor here, along with writer Jay Kristoff, they're having fun, but they're intelligently describing and crafting a world where it makes sense. They're being creative with the power sets, and they're intermixing the characters in a way that it does feel fresh and new and fun. And I really enjoyed it. And the Frederici art is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, just very well done. This was definitely one of the candidates for pick of the week for me. I really enjoyed this issue.
All right, up next we have Wonder Woman number 12 by the aforementioned Tom King. Tony S. Daniel handles art for this issue. He's been filling in on these Absolute Power tie-in issues for Daniel Sampere. Leonardo Prescia, I'm going to butcher this last name, Pasciaroti, I believe is how you say it. Paciarotti. Pasciaroti. Definitely an Italian. He handles the colors. Clayton Cowles on letters. This is basically an Absolute Power tie-in, like I mentioned, with Damian Wayne and Wonder Woman teaming up to try to get some information out of Captain Boomerang. So, what are your thoughts on it?
Honestly, I thought this. I just thought this was silly. I don't even have the heart to be. I could go on a rant, but what's the point? It's juvenile and it's silly, and it can be fun too. It tells us what we already know about Damian and Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman normally interrogates with a magic lasso. She doesn't have her magic lasso, so she tries to be, polite, and she doesn't have. Obviously, Wonder Woman has different tactics. She's not Batman or Damian, but they're interrogating Captain Boomerang. They were given the assignment by Nightwing. This is flowing. This is a Absolute Power tie-in. Nightwing gave them the assignment of finding out where the metahuman prisoners are. Where is Amanda Waller keeping all the metahumans as prisoners? And ultimately, we know that it's on Gamora Island. And so this entire issue is one long glorified conversation between Wonder Woman and Damian that I think has some moments that for those who like this issue more than I did, there are points of humor here where some of the things are they exemplify the differences between Damian and Wonder Woman. These aren't characters that know each other very well, Damian and Wonder Woman. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen these two interact and I can't remember the last time they interacted and had a conversation in the same panel, to be honest with you, but I'm probably going to be corrected on that. And, Captain Boomerang is somebody who is just refusing to tell him where the location is. And I guess it's meant to be sort of cute and funny that at the end, both Wonder Woman and Damian fail. They fail to get the information on Captain Boomerang, only because Captain Boomerang at the end is so stupid a character that he just blurts out in a moment of frustration at the end where the location is. And and that's really it. I like I said, I don't want to. Like I said, it had it felt it. What this actually felt like to me, if this was the backup and the characters were John Kent, Damian, and Trinity, I could see this being the backup because the backup is kind of a joke. It's kind of played for a parody. Imagine Trinity, John Kent, and Damian interrogating a villain, and all of them run successful, and then at the end they fail, but because the villain just blurts it out. That's what it felt like to me. But except this is actually real. There's a lot at stake here. Damian and Wonder Woman are supposed to be bringing their A game, and they fail. And so whereas I can see on the one hand liking this issue, and from a humor perspective, and maybe getting something out of the juxtaposition between Wonder Woman's tactics and Damian's. I can see that. Some people getting that. For me, I just felt that, I thought Tom King was doing. I don't think he hasn't done anything to move his main story proper, and it's not his fault that he's got to tie this into absolute power. But I felt he could have used this opportunity to tell us something about Wonder Woman, or have her actually use her intelligence as opposed to making her really look like a buffoon here, and Damian like a moron. There's even a scene in here where Damian cries. Why is he crying? I never felt it. I never felt this connection of how Wonder Woman can make Damian cry because he's like, it felt vacuous emotionally to me because I couldn't get into it because I was so confounded by at how they made it look so difficult getting information from Captain Boomerang. My God, most of the time Damian and Batman, when they interrogate someone, they're always successful. It happens off panel. We never see it because of course they're going to successfully interrogate them. We have literally hundreds of villains, 100 that they could have interrogated, 100 different ways that they could have found out that information that Wonder Woman could have used her intelligence, her wisdom, that Damian could have done this or done that. But it was just, in my view, this was just just sort of a cop-out way of doing it. They take Captain Boomerang out for a steak, take him out to a restaurant, they're going to have a conversation with him in a restaurant. Again, this feels like they're played for fools. It's like Tweedledee, Tweedledo, and Tweedledum walk into a bar. Guess which one's dumber? This starts off, you think Wonder Woman's got to be the dumbest in the room. Then it switches to Damian. And then at the end, it ends up that the dumbest person out of the three is in fact Captain Boomerang because he just tells them what they've been trying to get for the entire issue. And that's kind of funny. I'm not going to lie. I had some laugh out loud moments here where I just shook my head. But I'm sort of frustrated at the same time. But I'm oddly charmed by this. So it's kind of funny. I can understand why people would like it. I just wish I would have liked to have seen more. I would have liked to have seen Wonder Woman step up to the plate a little bit more and maybe impress Damian as opposed to just having their conversation. But I can see why many people could enjoy this. I can. For me, it just wasn't my cup of tea. But I suspect you feel quite differently.
No, not necessarily. At the end of the day, I'm invested in the Wonder Woman story that Tom King and Daniel Sampere have been writing. And Tom King, by his own admission, he's not the kind of writer that does well writing books for events that somebody else is running and that sort of thing. Like he freely admits that. Unfortunately for him, absolute power is way too big an event and way too important in what's going on in the DCU right now for him to not be a part of it. For Wonder Woman to not have a role to play in that book. That's just the reality of the situation, right? Um, but at the end of the day, Tom King's story is suffering for him having to write stories that tie into absolute power, because they sort of don't make sense. Um, he doesn't. What he's doing doesn't have anything to do with absolute power and what's happening in the pages of those books. So again, you can kind of understand why these this feels the way that it feels. And so, I don't disagree with you. Was it a little silly? Does Captain Boomerang, is Captain Boomerang a total idiot? I mean, all those things are true. He is a total idiot. I could totally see him, blurting something out, stupidly like he does here. So, from that perspective, it feels like it works. But at the same time, yeah, is this a story that needs to take place? Is it a story that needs to matter in terms of the overall DC universe and the story that Tom King is trying to tell in the pages of Wonder Woman? No, not really. To your point about Damian and Wonder Woman not really being characters that interact, that that has been true in the past. I do, but that is one of the things I think does work, because it is establishing somewhat of a relationship for them that other writers can build on, going forward. But at the end of the day, we'd all be better off if DC had just decided, yeah, we get that absolute power is an important event, and Wonder Woman's obviously an important character, so she's got to have somewhat of a tie-in. Just say, you know what, the entirety of Tom King's run takes place before absolute power. That would have been the way to do it, so that he wouldn't have to, I don't want to say waste time, because there are some values, there's some entertainment value in these stories. But these tie-ins aren't doing any favors to the story that Tom King is trying to tell. It's not bringing any, gravitas or any meaningful sort of dialogue or events to the Sovereign story. It's just not. And so, yeah, we end up with this kind of wonky, cutesy story of Damian and Diana, and it doesn't really feel like it's like it matters in the long run. And I won't go so far as to say Captain Boomerang is outsmarting them. In a way, it's the exact opposite, right? Like he's too dumb to even realize the danger he's in, and it's kind of the fact that Amanda Waller's using him like she's always used him. He's too dumb to even fathom that, but he's so dumb he ends up blurting out the information anyway. So yeah, a little hokey. Certainly not nowhere near the best issue of the series, but the Tony Daniel art was really strong. I felt like, I mean, I miss Daniel Sampere, but at the same time, I like that Daniel Sampere's not doing these issues and he's using the opportunity to get ahead on the I was almost going to say the regular issues, but the issues that aren't tying in, which makes sense, because you could almost just leave these out, right? Like even when you collect these, you could just leave these out. So anyway, yeah, I definitely not my favorite of the series, but was I mildly entertained? Yes, I was mildly entertained, and yeah, I'll be glad to get back on the regular issues of this for the long term. So anyway, what do you think about the backup?
The backup is more of the same. I always feel part of me feels I feel bad at talking about the backup, because I love Belen Ortega's art. I mean, I'm getting accustomed to it. I'm just having a hard time. I'm not. I find it an odd tactic. Is clearly DC is trying to build up in advance of Trinity's actual birth. They're trying to build up a future history between Trinity and Batman, and Damian Wayne and John Kent. But I just, it's just odd because these stories are so silly. They're fine. They're just silly. And it just feels out of sync and it just doesn't feel in continuity to me, even though I guess it could be. And it, again, I guess they're silly stories. There's some funny moments, and I can definitely see, somebody who doesn't, these are the first time these these characters interacting. In this particular story, they're trapped on or not. They're not trapped. They're traveling deep into space to fight Mongol and what they think is going to be a crisis level event. And basically, the moral of the story is they can't stand each other. And there's fart jokes and there's stinky underwear. And then it's the way they interact. And Trinity throws some tantrums. And they kind of have roommate syndrome. They get sick of each other as roommates because of the three of them living together on the spaceship for many days. They finally get to Mongol and they defeat him too easily, and so it's fun and it's lighthearted. I just and all this stuff I'm sure is going to be collected in a trade at some point. All these stories, and it's going to be great to pick up as a trade. Don't get me wrong. I find it really odd. Is there where's DC going with this? Is there going to be something after October with older adventures with all these three? I'm not sure. It's just different. It's just different. But I'm not sure. I'm a little bit. I don't know what to make of where it's going, but because this really feels like sort of out of continuity stories, and that's fine. It's just because I'm such an in continuity guy. I don't even know if I like Trinity yet. And to be honest with you, having this silly version of her doesn't endear her to me in terms of fitting well into the existing continuity. But maybe I'm just being an old curmudgeon and too set in my ways. Because I want to like Trinity, but I'm not even sure what her origin is yet. So I guess I got to give some time to grow. I will say that Tom King did say in an interview that he's not even going to be finished his Sovereign storyline until the mid-20s, and we're only at issue 12. So we're looking at another 12 issues before we even get a resolution of the Sovereign storyline. So who knows how long we're going to have to wait for the Trinity resolution, although it does hint at solicitations. We should be getting that in the next few months, but we shall see. So what do you think of this?
I actually like the backup. I mean, it does remind me of brothers and sisters in a lot of ways, and the way that they can interact at times. So from that perspective, it does work for me. I enjoy it. But here's the big difference, and there's a really big difference between the two. I don't think that the backup is not intended for us to take it seriously. The backup is clearly supposed to be played for laughs, as opposed to the main story. I think it is trying to take itself a little bit more seriously. So, from that perspective, I don't want to say that that there was no entertainment value for the main story, but it's easier to take this one for the laughs and the jokes and what have you, because that's what the backups have always been for these three. And so I enjoy it. Plus, the butt of the jokes in the backups typically is Damian Wayne. And since I don't really care for the character, I love that he gets the most crap from his adopted brother and sister here. And it just makes sense. So yeah, I enjoy the backups more so than the main stories typically. So all right, up next we have Superman 17. Here is another tie into Absolute Power, written by Joshua Williamson, Jamal Campbell on art and color, Ariana Mayer handling the letters. We saw, I think it was in the pages of Absolute Power number 2, where we after everybody was attacked at the Fortress of Solitude, there was Superman and Zatanna that for lack of a better term ran off together to try to escape and find a way to help defeat Amanda Waller. So we kind of see in this issue where they went, and where they went is to the bar with no name. Is that what it's called?
Oblivion Bar, isn't it?
Oblivion Bar. That's it. Yeah, the Oblivion Bar, to try to track down some of the magic users who are basically hiding out. And when they get there, Superman does what you would expect Superman to do. He kind of calls them out, like, you guys are all just sitting here, trying to be safe, trying to keep your heads down, and there's people out there, people you consider friends, who are who need your help, who are in danger, what have you. And there is somebody in the bar that offers to help them, but you be careful who you make deals with, because it's Neron, right? A deal with the devil, basically DC's version of the devil, and he's offering them help. He's offering them the map of Mordru that they think that they can use to find a way to defeat Waller. But again, be careful what you wish for. But it is great to see Superman kind of standing up to magic users. It's funny. He uses the explanation. He's like, I'm vulnerable to magic even when I have my superpowers. So even though I don't have my superpowers now, it's no different, right? I'm still going to stand up for what I believe in. So definitely Joshua Williamson understanding the assignment as he has throughout his Superman run, really understanding the character very well. The art from Jamal Campbell is up to the usual standards that he has. We did see in last issue of Superman, Lois putting on the Superman armor that Lex had used at one point. She looks fantastic in that armor. I almost wish that on the other side of absolute power, we've seen solicits already, and we've seen that Lois is going to be Superwoman. She's going to have powers or what have you. I almost wish it was not necessarily that she gained powers, but just maybe the armor gets fused on. She can't take it off, whatever. Because I really like the way she looks in this armor, even more than I like her when she's dressed as Superwoman. That Dan Panosian amazing variant cover notwithstanding, but she just looks awesome here. And Williamson does take some time to touch on what's going on with Lex and Lois and Jimmy and Siobhan and Lena. So I appreciate that as well. Man, I think it's fair to say, and I would have to probably think on it a little more and maybe do a little bit more reading. But at this moment in time, I think it's fair to say that this Superman run might be my favorite thing Joshua Williamson has ever written. Definitely my favorite thing Joshua Williamson has ever written at DC. But he's done some other, great stuff, Dark Ride and some other, G.I. Joe and other things at other publishers. But man, his Superman run is, again, the best thing he's ever done at DC. He really understands these characters. I love the pacing. This is sort of the exact opposite of the problems that we have with Tom King and Wonder Woman, where his story is just not suited to really tie into other events. That's just the nature of the difference in the stories, and the way the stories are constructed. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. It doesn't mean one writer is better than the other. But Williamson has managed to intertwine his story and what he's been doing throughout his Superman run so well with absolute power that it's seamless. It's seamless. It doesn't miss a beat. Still feels like we're moving forward. The little subplots and threads that he's been building throughout, just awesome. Such a fantastic issue. And also he did mention that he wanted to get Superman back to his black costume, which he's able to do here with a great in-story explanation. And it's cool to see that, the 90s nostalgia of when he came back from the dead wearing that black costume. It's really cool as well. So what were your thoughts on this?
I actually really enjoyed it. Jamal Campbell's art's fantastic. I love Joshua Williamson. He understands these characters. I love Zatanna. I love the use of magic here. I think it's very creative. I love one of my favorite pages. Jamal Campbell is so creative. How they enter the Oblivion Bar. How he utilizes the words on the page sort of come off the page and they sort of disappear as if they're the words are just the way that they evaporate with language for lack of a better way of describing it. I think it just works so well, and it looks magical. So I feel that there's magic in the air in this comic, and for them to end up in the Oblivion Bar, and Williamson captures the ambiance of the Oblivion Bar so well because one thing that we knew from the Justice League Dark series is that the Oblivion Bar. The magicians and sorcerers of the DC universe, they're a different kind of lot. They don't have the same sort of moral base as the superheroes do. They think different, and they are different, and they got a different relationship with darkness. And they're not necessarily the embodiment of the heroic ideal, which Superman reminds them of very obviously this issue, and it works very, very well. It's also worth noting that at the end, when Neuron speaks up and he's sitting there having a naturally he's drinking what appears to be some expensive whiskey or something in the corner there. He says they can make a deal. Remember that Neuron had a meeting with Amanda Waller back. I think it was in a Titans issue I think they were discussing Raven or what have you. So it's very curious. Is Neuron always just works for himself? I mean, Amanda Waller might always just be out for herself, but Neuron is always has an agenda. So, and there's always a price to pay when you make a deal with Neuron. You got to really wonder what that price is going to be. And we know that Neuron is no longer king of hell. That's Doomsday. So, what does Neuron want? We know that a Doomsday storyline's coming up. So I'm just wondering if all this is connected. And you said it, and you're absolutely right. Joshua Williamson has nailed this connection to absolute power by making the Superman comic more interesting. And usually when there's a tie-in to a major event, often the tie-in comics are less interesting. For example, Wonder Woman, and I don't mean to be harsh on Tom King's, but, sometimes it's hard for writers to make, if they're in the middle of a narrative, to make a tie-in interesting. But Joshua Williamson can pull it off. Jeremy Adams, I think, can pull it off effectively. But, less so for some other writers. So I appreciate what Williamson has done here and a great effect. And yeah, this was a very entertaining issue. And this is what makes these events that much better, because we're only getting, it's so interesting with this event. We're only getting 4 Absolute Power main issues proper, but then we're getting 7 issues of Task Force 7. And then a lot of these tie-ins, a lot of the tie-ins in Task Force 7 are actually on par or better than the main series proper. It's interesting. So it's an interesting event. The best event we've had in DC in a while. That might not be saying much, but I'm still at a point where I'm enjoying Absolute Power, and it's better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I do wish some of the events that we're seeing in these others were in the main book, and we got like maybe 6 issues of the main story, and not to say that we couldn't still have some interesting things going on in in this tie-in or what have you. But yeah, I so often publishers are like, well, you don't need to buy everything, just buy the main series, whatever. But then they don't put everything in, they say that, and I don't want to, go so far as to say it's lip service, but then there are things that are important to know that happen in these side tie-ins that I think are important enough to be in the main book. But anyway, let's move on. Up next, we have Batman, Superman, World's Finest. We're up to issue number 30 of the series, still being written by Mark Waid. Gleb Melnikoff is the artist on this particular issue. Tamara Bonvillain on colors, Dave Sharp on letters. This is a story, this particular issue, it's a story of the first time that Superman, Batman, and Dick Grayson Robin go to Paradise Island. They're there to help solve a murder mystery, if you will, that Diana has been unable to solve herself. Even using her lasso of truth, she's been unable to find out what's going on. Again, it's Mark Waid doing what he does best, telling a story that while it's in continuity technically, it's a story where I guess the best way to put it is it could sort of fit in any time, right? Like it's timeless. You don't need to read anything else to understand what's happening here. It makes sense what's going on. And again, Mark Waid showing his ability, his deep DC knowledge, and being able to write a story that is really entertaining, that doesn't necessarily need deep knowledge from DC for anybody else, I guess is the best way to put it. So I thought this was really well done. I thought the Gleb Melnikoff art was really invoked a Dan Mora vibe. Melnikoff, his stuff tends to be a little more stylized than Dan Mora's art tends to be most of the time, but a little bit of an exception this time. In that it was a little cleaner than it usually is. And again, I'm a fan of Gleb. I think his art's fantastic. But I just thought that he really went above and beyond in this particular issue. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was relatively well done too. I Gleb Melnikov's art I thought was exceptional. I thought it was really good. I really like the way that he renders Diana. I think she looks well. He just draws. I think I like the sexiness he brings uh, to the female characters. I think it works real well, and I like the idea that there was depending on how you feel about Wonder Woman. Yeah, I like the fact that Mark Waid sort of identifies some dissension on Paradise Island. They have a murder on Paradise Island, and even their princess Diana has to go get Batman, the world's greatest detective, to come and help them. They can't solve the murder by themselves, and but he identifies that it's the elephant in the room, and Superman and Batman and Robin, they're all out of respect. They realize that it's a privilege to be on the island, and they know that Amazons are getting more and more, they're on edge, and they don't like the fact that men are there. This is the early days where Amazons aren't as familiar with men's world, and maybe still have some inherent misandry toward men, which presumably they lose the more they have connections to man's world through Wonder Woman's adventures in the years that follow. So there's a lot of things you can read in between the lines here. I kind of laughed a little bit in terms of how Batman solves the mystery, that since the arrogance of Batman to assume that, well, since I found no clues that there was a murder, obviously the person wasn't murdered and they're still alive. That's literally what Batman concludes. Well, if I can't find a clue, obviously the person who is dead is not really dead. And of course, the Dietrine is not really dead and has manipulated the minds of all the people on Paradise Island, including Diana. And I thought that was kind of funny. I thought it was kind of comical, and it also, again, I thought, definitely put in, Uber Batman. He's like, if Batman can't find a clue, well, then obviously there isn't a murder if you can't find a clue to a murder. I don't know if I agree with that logic, but it kind of makes sense in a crazy way given the story. And I love my favorite page in the interior art. There's one where Melnikov draws Wonder Woman just showing her biceps with holding the magic lasso. She just looks really kick-ass, and it looks amazing. And there's a really great moment where the Trinity comes together, where Wonder Woman may not have enough willpower to defeat Dietrine, but Batman grabs onto the magic lasso and Superman, and it's the Trinity working together to defeat an enemy for the first time on Paradise Island. I thought it was a kind of an epic moment for a one-shot comic. And these are the types of issues that really I remember fondly as a kid, that really pulled you into these characters, made you love these characters because they're awesome. And they're not only individually awesome, but they work together so well. There's a reason why they're called the Trinity. And Melnikov does a fantastic job on those pages where the Trinity works together. This really, really works. And it wouldn't have worked as effectively as it did if it not for the art. He definitely understood the assignment here. And I thought Waid did a decent job with the story again. And Melnikov's art was really fantastic. I found myself, I quite enjoyed this, even if maybe there's a part of me that's a little miffed that Wonder Woman couldn't maybe figure some of it out on her own. But I'm going to let that go because of all the other enjoyment I had with the story.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right, up next we have Green Lantern War Journal number 12, final issue of this series, written by Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Art is by Montos, colors by Adriana Lucas, letters by Dave Sharp. How did you feel this landed?
I had some time to reflect on all the comics this week, and cutting to the chase, I was generally satisfied with this ending. I have to admit, I did have to read it a second time because I was a little confused. But then upon a second reading, I thought, well, it was more obvious than I realized. And I actually liked that I was satisfied with this ending. I'm happy with the way that PKJ sort of ended what for me initially was I was kind of confused with the Dark Star of the Fen and how that tied into Olgren's ring and what have you. This sort of tied things in a little bit better for me. And Montos's art is fantastic. And I really loved how John Stewart here ends up with Olgren's ring where he's able to control the Radiant Dead with Ogren's Ring, and he doesn't realize that he can control them. That's a revelation that he discovers in the issue, and he utilizes the Ogren's Ring to control the Radiant Dead, and then on top of that, return to our universe to help out Ellie, who is protecting his mother, and the way that resolves itself is, I think it sort of brings everything home. And these two storylines, which at times for me felt a little bit too disparate, too apart, it came together well enough. Maybe it could be a little bit better, but for the most part, I was happy with it because, I was just happy with it. Now, some of the questions I have is, it's really curious in terms of how it sets up John Stewart Green Lantern moving forward, because on his left hand, he's got Ogren's Ring, and on his right hand, he's got the Green Lantern Ring. And as his mother, there's some really touching moments again where his mother is seemingly dying. And here's where I had mixed feelings about it at first, and I still have conflicted feelings about it. And that is namely that he tells, like, his mother's dying, and his mother's telling him, John, let me go. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a hero's lesson. That's a harsh lesson for a hero to accept, that there's some things you can't change. But PKJ, and I admit this was a misdirection for me, he threw a fast one on me, and it was like, no. Green Lanterns can do anything. That's what John Stewart says. And he uses the Radiant, the Ogren's Ring to... And I'm not sure what he does. I'm not sure if I think he uses the Ogren's Ring to preserve the consciousness of his mother. I think his mother dies, but he preserves her consciousness in the construct of his ring, because his mother is talking to him through his ring. At least that's the impression I got. And Ellie is still around, so he's got the construct of Ellie, who he acknowledges is developing her own sentience and developing on her own. So she's a developing AI existing independent of his power over her with his ring. And I was actually kind of curious as to your thoughts, how you interpreted the ending, particularly with respect to his mother, who appeared to get younger, and I think is speaking to him. I'm not sure if she's embodied or embedded in his Green Lantern ring or Ogren's ring. I think it's Green Lantern's ring, but I'm a little bit unclear now. What's the relationship between Ogren's ring and John Stewart's Green Lantern ring? He has both now? What's the relationship between the two? I'm a little unclear as to what exactly the power set is with Ogren's ring, because he's keeping control of the Radiant Dead within the ring. So that's kind of a little bit wonky, but so it's interesting. I like the ending with the mother, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, I think maybe the story might have had more impact had his mother died. I know that sounds really odd thing to say, but the fact that he was able to prevent his mother from dying, I thought maybe this story would have more impact if she in fact died, because he defied his mother. His mother wanted to be let go, but he preserved her consciousness, and now she's immortal. You're making a huge assumption there, John. You're making your mother immortal and living in your ring, or maybe I don't know. I got open questions. I'm a little unclear how it ended, but I liked it. The questions I'm having right now, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I'm satisfied enough that I would recommend this to people. And I really like the character work in this series. This was 12 issues long. It's going to make a fantastic trade for people who read it. I think it's going to read really good as a trade. And I think there's some satisfaction you have at the end regarding, Ellie and his relationship with his mother, who is still alive, sort of giving John guidance within the construct of one of his the Green Lantern rings. So in any event, I thought for the most part it worked for me. I think I got to say he did. This landed good for me. I won't say it was a spectacular ending, but it was a satisfying ending for me that I would recommend this title. And I thought he nailed this landing in a way that Jeffrey Thorne didn't nail the landing in his Green Lantern run. So I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I liked it as well. Here's the thing. I'm glad you brought up the Jeffrey Thorne thing as well, because I completely agree with you, right? Like the things that John Stewart was able to do in the Jeffrey Thorne series, it never felt like there was a great explanation. And that's why we I think our biggest criticism of that run was it just felt so much like it felt too fanboy, right? It felt like it was leveling John Stewart up for the sake of leveling John Stewart up, as opposed to this, which really leaned into the emotionality and the intimacy and why John cares about his mother and who he is as a character, and leaning into his architecture background and that sort of thing. So really, hitting me where I live when it comes to the way I see John Stewart as a character. So it really worked on a lot of those levels. Now, if I have to nitpick and I have to give any criticisms, we've talked so many times about what a fantastic world builder Phillip Kennedy Johnson is. The problem with that is, these intricate and big ideas that he builds, there's not always room on the page to have those, explained really, really well. So in terms of the Dark Star of the Fen and Olgrin and all that sort of stuff, I don't know in my head if I have a really good, complete understanding of it. I'm sure if I, sat down for a few hours with Phillip and had him, walk me through it, I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. I wish you could have put more of that in the story or what have you. But yeah, that stuff's just not always possible. It's just, the nature of comics. But in terms of what John Stewart is able to do here, I took it as something similar to, leaving a piece of himself and his willpower behind, to be this Ellie who now has become independent. The way that I read that is she's been a separate part of John Stewart long enough that she's now sort of become her own, for lack of a better term, her own being, if you will. So I think that it works on several levels when we talk about it in that context. But a little bit different than what his mom now is, right? So I took what happened there as him, refusing to let her go, which again, it feels very much like something John would do. But it also felt like it wasn't the same as what he did with Ellie. It was more along the lines of, okay, John is going to use both the Green Lantern ring and the Ring of Olgrin in tandem to, like you said, preserve the consciousness of his mother for the long term. I don't think I didn't. It didn't come across to me that she was in one ring or another ring or what have you. It more felt like she was a little bit of a separate entity, if you will. But that, she is somebody that's going to be there for him in the long term to, to advise him and to be there for him. And it's, where that goes from here, I guess we'll have to wait and see. It's almost like the end of this story introduced some really fantastic ideas to the point where it's like, well, this is where the series should be going. It feels like it just got started.
Yeah.
But instead it's actually the end. So we know he's going to be showing up. John Stewart's going to be showing up in the pages of Green Lantern from Jeremy Adams. Obviously, Jeremy will be writing that, but I'm sure he's going to get plenty of input from PKJ. And we know they have the Civil Core one-shot coming, and probably more tie-ins coming after that as well. So I'm sure, Jeremy Adams is smart enough to know what a fantastic series this is and what a talented writer Phillip Kennedy Johnson is. I'm sure he's going to be, picking his brain and any future developments or what have you with John Stewart. Jeremy's certainly going to get input. So Montos art was fantastic throughout this entire run. I don't think the story lands with the impact that it does without Montos on art. So really excited for the future of John Stewart and what's to come. Where exactly we'll see that, remains to be seen. So, all right. Last book we're going to talk about in detail this time, Dark Winged Queen, Part 7 from Tom Taylor, Lucas Meyer on art, Adriana Lucas on colors, Wes Abbott on letters, Teen Titans number 14. What are your thoughts on this?
It's funny. This is this seems sort of hit me out of the blue, this issue, because there's more at stake for the Titans and for the DC universe in this issue than absolute power, quite frankly. This is actually a Justice League level threat that finally the Titans they're dealing with a Justice League level threat, and that's Raven. And this, I guess, the Darkwing Queen is. I mean, she basically takes out Spectre and two other godlike cosmological beings who frankly I don't know who they are, but I mean, taking out the Spectre is a pretty big deal. This issue, Tom Taylor does a good job where you know, Nightwing reveals the fact that he's always been sort of suspicious of Raven, given her behavior, and that ultimately it's, you know, it's her full. The secret's out. She's the Darkwing Queen, and the fact of the matter is that she's extremely powerful, and she basically is. She's making her big play here now. Really, I think Tom Taylor, like in terms of what he does, this is just an issue where she sort of takes out the Spectre, and there's a lot of it leads to this big revelation. And this Darkwing Queen looks very intimidating. She looks I wish this transformation would have occurred earlier. She's more powerful now, and I'm more invested now. But I almost feel now it's like, well, if you'd have done this 6 issues ago, I'd have been more invested. For some reason, I feel like, oh, damn, this doesn't have the impact on me as I know it should. Because it's actually kind of a cool issue. I liked it. I just wish it was 6 issues ago. This would have been cool had it happened immediately following Beast World, I think. But I actually think, for me, I know this sounds crazy, but this is actually my favorite issue of Titans from issue 1. I actually enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. And even Swamp Thing shows up. I think it's real kick-ass. And I'm really curious as to know, I mean, you know, and then even Trigon shows up, or I'm sorry, yeah, that's Trigon. Yeah. I was confusing with Neron for a second. But Trigon shows up, and of course he wants his daughter to kick ass. And I'm wondering if the Dark-Winged Raven is going to be betraying her own father, because, you know, what the hell does she need her father Trigon for when she could presumably defeat even him? So I think Trigon's in for a big surprise with his daughter, and he might rue the day that he gave power to the Darkwing Queen as opposed to Raven, the better half, so to speak. But I'm really curious to see how this resolves itself. I kind of chuckle at the end here where Nightwing actually says, "Oh my God, we need reinforcements. We need every hero on Earth." And I'm thinking to myself, Nightwing, you're the Justice League. What the hell, man? You already called every hero in Beast World. Can't you handle any of these problems by yourself? Do you always need help? I mean, when you're in Bloodhaven, you always need help from other heroes. And when you're on the Titans, you need help from everybody. You're supposed to be the Justice League level. Anyways, I'm being a little bit facetious here. I actually enjoyed this issue. I'm actually really curious to know what happens to Raven. And what's going to be the long-term consequences for Raven and the Darkwing Queen? What's going to happen here? And also, just as a side note, this is another example of something that didn't coincide well with Absolute Power. I mean, I would think that Amanda Waller, where's Amanda Waller here? Like, I would have think that she'd have been, like, the Darkwing Queen clearly has her own agenda independent of Amanda Waller. It's not like Amanda Waller to let these wild cards like this run rampant. I mean, I can't imagine a bigger wild card to Amanda Waller's plans than a devil level threat like the Darkwing Queen, whose loyalty is not necessarily to Amanda Waller at all. Again, I don't even know if Amanda Waller is going to be dealt with in this when this storyline resolves itself, but we kind of already had an Absolute Power sort of tie-in. We had an Amanda Waller tie-in already with the Titans, and then all of a sudden she's gone, and then is that it? I mean, I know there's more issues to come, and I haven't read future solicits, but regardless, whatever. I'm not going to care all that much. If I'm more, if there isn't a direct tie-in to Absolute Power, I probably am not going to care all that much. I'm more interested in how is this going to impact Raven and Raven's relationship with Beast Boy, because Beast Boy's had some trauma. Now Raven will have some trauma. They're a perfect relationship, two dysfunctional beings. So I'm curious to see how this is going to resolve itself. And in particular, just for the Titans moving forward post Absolute Power, Titans no longer being the Justice League anymore because we're going to have Justice League Unlimited. And then how are they going to be perceived as having to deal with this threat? And if they fail to effectively deal with the Darkwing Queen, they're going to have the judgment of an entire world that might look down upon the Titans as being subpar Justice Leaguers. And so there might be a consequence to that. And I know that your interview with Mark Waid, he sort of hinted that those types of themes might be dealt with post Absolute Power. So I really enjoyed this issue, and it was the favorite Titans issue so far since issue 1 for me. So I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you. I think this might be the best issue of Titans from the entire series. And it's so interesting as Tom Taylor's reaching the end of two. Obviously he was on Nightwing for much longer than he was on Titans, but he's got two ongoing series where he's coming to the end. So far, we only know Detective Comics. I imagine something else is going to be announced at some point that he's working on another title at DC, but we'll see. He was rumored to be taking over the Flash at one point. That ended up being Cy Spurrier, but I would be interested in his take on the Flash. I guess we'll see. But so interesting as he's coming to the end of these two series, and while we've enjoyed Nightwing, and I've enjoyed Nightwing, and I feel like this last Fallen Grayson storyline is very good. Some of the things that I feel like are missing, and how it's being a little bit rushed. It's the exact opposite in Titans, where Nightwing has been the more quality title throughout its run, and Titans has been a little lacking. Titans is definitely on the upswing, just as he's leaving. I guess leave on a high note, I guess, if that's what you're going to do. So, I love the idea of Raven. I mean, if we have to have a Raven story, it's a little bit cliche. Of course, Trigon's going to be there. We've talked about that ad nauseum. I won't belabor it here. But at least if you're going to do it, do it big. And that's what Tom Taylor's doing here with Raven really leveling up to where she's more powerful than her father. She is the Darkwing Queen. Is Trigon just going to end up as another little gem in her crown and make her even more powerful? I mean, the fact that she's able to she hasn't exactly defeated the Spectre yet, but she's able to kind of shrug him off. He cuts her in half, and she's like, whatever. She's trying to shrug her shoulders. Let me get myself back together. Like, the Spectre is one of the most powerful beings in the DCU. Part of the quintessence and all that. So the fact that she's, up to that level, they are going to need some help, even if it was the Justice League or what have you. But then it does beg the question that you brought up, which I was going to bring up as well. It's like, so where does this fit in with Absolute Power? Who are you asking for help? Because nobody even has powers, although the Titans here still have powers. And it wouldn't be as big of a deal if it wasn't for the fact that the events of Beast World and recent events with Amanda Waller in the pages of Titans tied in so closely as a prologue to Absolute Power. They powers that be at DC tied the Titans title into the lead up to Absolute Power so closely that now it's much harder for us to set it aside and say, okay, Absolute Power is not happening right now or whatever. Well, how can you say that? Because everything with Amanda Waller was happening in the midst of this storyline. And now this storyline's still going on. So I guess we'll have to figure that all these events in the last few issues of Tom Taylor's Justice League happened before Waller makes her big move. She's still right now, if there was a little interlude in this issue and it said, what's Amanda Waller up to right now? We'd see that she's maybe she's in the little, whatever you call it, bed or whatever it was, where she had the electrodes to her head and she was, living a lifetime with the Brainiac Queen. Maybe that's what she's doing right now while these events are happening. So, that's the only way I can make it make sense. Why isn't Amanda Waller involved in this? Why isn't Amanda Waller trying to go and recruit the Darkwing Queen? Why isn't she, using this at least as an excuse to say, hey, look what the Titans are doing. The world is threatened again by an Omega level threat. We need to stop superheroes or whatever. But she's nowhere to be found. Yeah, she's got to be in that other world right now, right? Convincing the Brainiac Queen to be on her side. That's the only thing, literally the only thing that makes sense to me. So that's what I'm doing in my head. But anyway, yeah, you're right. Best issue of the series so far. This is kind of what I hoped for the series throughout. This level of action and this level of threat and gorgeous art from Lucas Meyer. So at least, like I said, it's ending on a high note. So let's go ahead and talk about the collections that are coming out this week. That is all of the single issues that are out this week, except for the fact that every week now DC has has some facsimiles that come out, whether that be issues of reprints of Crisis on Infinite Earths or some other things. And this week it is another reprint of a Crisis on Infinite Earths issue. This time it's issue number 5 with a fantastic George Perez cover with a bunch of faces or heads, if you will, of different classic DC characters. And of course, there's a foil version of it, as there always is these days with these facsimile editions. At least DC hasn't gone to doing what Marvel has, and now there's even variants of the facsimiles, which makes no sense to me. If it wasn't originally printed with that cover, don't reprint it with a different cover. But anyway, that's a rant for another day. In terms of collections that are out this week, we have Batman Volume 2, The Batman of Gotham. So this is the Chip Zdarsky Batman run. This collects issues 131 through 136. We also have Elseworlds Justice League Volume 1 trade paperback. This is collecting various Justice League Elseworlds tales, like League of Justice 1 and 2, Justice Riders 1, Elseworlds Finest 1 and 2, Elseworlds Finest Supergirl and Batman 1, Titans Scissors Paper Stone number 1, and Wonder Woman Amazonia number 1. We also have Green Lantern by Jeff Johns, Book 1 trade paperback, collecting a ton of the Jeff Johns Green Lantern material. It's 400 pages. It's $40. I'm not going to go through what's in it because it's too much to list. But if you're curious about that, very well received and very well respected Jeff Johns Green Lantern. A little cheaper than getting in an omnibus, although it doesn't have as much material. But I imagine they're going to come out with a volume 2 that will, along with this volume 1, end up being the equivalent of what you would get in omnibus. We also have, speaking of omnibuy, Swamp Thing by Nancy A. Collins, which collects Swamp Things 110 through 139, Annual 6 and 7, Black Orchid 5, and some other Vertigo stuff from writer Nancy Collins. It's 984 pages with some fantastic art. So if you are a Swamp Thing fan and so inclined, you can pick that up. Speaking of Titans Beast World, we have the entirety of that collected in Titans Beast World trade paperback. It collects issues 1 through 6, as well as Titans issue 6 and 7. And then we also have a direct market version of that. So there's 2 different covers for that Titans Beast World collection. You'll have your choice of which one you want to pick up. So that brings us to Book of the Week, Rocky. This is the first time in a while it's been a little tough to choose for me. I feel like we had one week where it's tough to choose because I didn't think anything was really worthy of being Book of the Week. Then we've had other weeks recently where it was really obvious what was Book of the Week. I sort of like it when it's these weeks where there's a couple, like 2 or 3 books that I think are really excellent and worthy of being Book of the Week. And that's kind of where I find myself this week. What about you? Is it an easy choice, tough choice?
It was down to 2, but I do have one. Do you want to say yours first? You want me to?
No, go ahead. By all means.
Well, I have to settle on. I have to settle on Green Lantern because it was between Green Lantern. It was between Green Lantern and Dark Knights of Steel Allwinter. But at the end of the day, Green Lantern, PKG, he did give me a satisfying ending, and he made me. It was thought provoking, and I still had it. I still shed a tear at last issue with it. So it had its emotional high points, its character moments, and it ended in a way that I understood the general narrative, and I was rewarded for sticking with it, even though it did sort of lose me a little bit at times. He nailed the landing enough that it's a recommend for me, and I really enjoyed it. So, what about yourself?
Yeah, I kind of had 3, but what's interesting, so Dark Knights wasn't on there at all, and Green Lantern I think was probably my third choice if I had to rank him, but he did stick the landing so well, and there's so much still to come, and just kind of overall for the series, again, it was the John Stewart that I really enjoyed that version, less military, more of a family guy, more of the architect. So I did give consideration to that. But for me, it was really between Jenny Sparks number 1 and Superman number 17. And it is a really tough choice because I really enjoyed that first Jenny Sparks issue. there's a lot to think about there, and a lot more good to come. But ultimately, I think I have to go Superman 17, just based on the strength of Joshua Williamson being able to continue to tell his story and continue his storylines and plot lines, but still tie in so effortlessly with what's going on in Absolute Power. Plus, the Jamal Campbell art is amazing. You mentioned the use of the words that come off the page of the spell book, which was awesome. The color work is great. Seeing Superman in the black costume is great. Seeing him call everybody out in the Oblivion bar is great. So, yeah, it ended up being ultimately a pretty easy choice. Partly because I think I'll have future opportunities to pick Jenny Sparks when we get a little further along in that story. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Superman. Just a fantastic issue. Yeah, this might be my favorite run on a Superman title that I can remember, like in a probably since Dan Jurgens first got back on Action Comics for DC
Yeah.
Rebirth. I think this is my favorite Superman run since then.
Yeah, it's
Um,
really good. It's definitely one of my favorite too. In decades, actually, for me,
yeah,
in decades, it's that good. Yeah, it's really
yeah,
good.
it's fantastic. So, anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Don't forget, if you're listening to us audio only, be sure you're checking us out on YouTube as well. You want to see all the art, see our smiling faces, what have you. We're here every week on Rocky's channel, Comic Boom, Comic Space Boom, exclamation point on YouTube. Be sure when you head over there, you subscribe, ring the notification bell, leave some comments below. We love to get conversations going in the comment section. Also, the Comic Source YouTube channel is available where all my interviews go up, other reviews and convention coverage and all that stuff. Really appreciate all the support everybody's been showing over there. We've had some great conversations going in the comments. All of my interviews I did at San Diego Comic-Con, plus the ones after. You guys are really showing up over there, so I appreciate all the support. If you prefer to listen audio only, we're available there as well on the Comic Source podcast feed. Just go to whatever platform or app you use for your podcast to search for the Comic Source and subscribe. If you're new to us, you have literally thousands of episodes to go back and enjoy from the over a decade that I've been doing this now. So as always, we appreciate the support, and we will talk to you next time.
Catch you later.